The soapy water burned the cracks in my hands as I scrubbed the floor of the Silver Bistro. This was my second job, the one that kept the lights on while my nursing salary went into a secret vault. Suddenly, a group of teenagers walked in, laughing loudly. My heart stopped when I saw Leo, my 19-year-old son, leading them. He didn't look away in shame. Instead, he pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of me on my knees, and tapped his screen. Seconds later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. He had posted the photo to his 50,000 followers. The caption read, "Imagine having zero ambition. Some people are born to be floor mats." He walked right up to me, his expensive sneakers inches from my scrub brush. "Hey, floor mat," he said coldly. "We need a refill on water. Fast." He didn't even blink. I finished my shift with a heavy stone in my chest. When I walked into our small apartment, I found Leo throwing his designer clothes into expensive suitcases. The room was a mess, and the window he had smashed during a tantrum yesterday was still jagged and broken. "I'm out of here, Elena," he said, refusing to call me mom. "Julian sent a car. I'm moving into the mansion. I'm tired of your poverty mindset holding me back. You're just dead weight." He looked at the cracked walls with pure disgust. I tried to speak, to tell him I loved him, but he just shoved past me. He tossed a crumpled piece of paper at my feet. It was the $500 repair bill for the broken window. "Pay that with your floor scrubbing money," he sneered. Then, he slammed the door, leaving me in the silence of my own heartbreak. Once I was sure he was gone, I locked the door and moved the rug in the corner of the room. I pried up a loose floorboard. I didn't reach for a bottle of wine to drown my sorrows. Instead, I pulled out a stack of dusty bank books. For 10 long years, I hadn't just been surviving, I had been a ghost in the financial world. Every penny from my night shift nursing and my secret transcription work had been flowing into a trust fund for Leo. It was meant to be his surprise on his 20th birthday. However, my own father had added a character clause to the original family inheritance that started this fund. The money was only his if he proved to be a person of integrity. Looking at the floor mat post on my phone, I knew the clock was ticking. I sat at my laptop, the screen light making my tired eyes ache. I knew my ex-husband, Julian, was only taking Leo in because he smelled money. Julian had always been a predator. I logged into the private tuition portal for the elite academy Leo attended. Julian thought he was the one providing that education through his connections, but I was the anonymous donor paying every cent. I saw a notification for a $10,000 overpayment refund due to a scholarship Leo had accidentally won. Usually, I would let it sit for next semester. Not tonight. I clicked through the security settings and redirected that refund into a private, untraceable account. I left the tuition balance at exactly 0. It was a small, digital snip of the apron strings. If Julian wanted to play the wealthy father, he could start paying the bills. 2 weeks later, I was working as a server at a high-end charity gala. It was the same event where Julian was launching Leo into high society. I kept my head down, wearing my uniform and a mask, moving through the crowd with a tray of champagne. I slipped behind a velvet curtain to adjust my shoes when I heard Julian's voice. He was talking to a group of wealthy investors. "It's a tragedy, really," Julian said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Leo's mother, Elena, is a heavy substance abuser. That's why she's not here. I've had to step in to save the boy from her darkness." My blood ran cold, but I didn't scream. I pulled out my service phone, hit record, and captured every lying word. He was destroying my name to make himself look like a saint. The next morning, Leo called me. My heart leaped for a second, thinking he missed me, but his voice was like ice. "Where is the vintage watch, Elena? The gold one from Grandpa?" That watch was the only thing I had left of my father. I told you years ago, Leo, I said softly. I had to sell it to pay for your emergency appendix surgery when you were 10. We had no insurance. Leo laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. You probably just spent it on more poverty stuff. Good, it was an ugly, old-fashioned watch anyway. Don't call me again. He hung up. I walked over to my safe deposit box key. I hadn't sold the watch. I had worked 3 jobs back then to avoid selling it. I had it appraised yesterday. Because of its history and brand, it was worth $80,000. The walls were starting to close in on Julian's lies. Through my transcription work for a local law firm, I had access to public records before they hit the news. A foreclosure notice had been issued for Julian's mansion. His wealth was a house of cards built on unpaid loans and bravado. That evening, I received a frantic, angry voice note from Leo. Dad says you're blocking our rightful inheritance from Grandpa. He says you're hiding the trust documents because you're greedy. His voice turned dark and threatening. If you don't sign over the control of that trust by my birthday, I'll call the cops. I'll tell them you hit me and stole my belongings. I'll ruin your nursing license. Choose wisely, floor mat. I listened to it twice, my heart breaking, then I saved the file. I didn't panic. In the ER, when a patient is crashing, you move with purpose. I called Mr. Thorne, a high-powered attorney I knew from years of transcribing his most complex depositions. We met in a quiet office. I'm not just a nurse, Mr. Thorne, I said, handing him a flash drive. For a decade, I had been transcribing the dirty secrets of the city's elite. I had stumbled upon Julian's fraudulent business dealings during a late-night shift 6 months ago. I had records of his shell companies and his tax evasion. He's threatening my livelihood, I told him. And my son is being used as a weapon. Mr. Thorne looked at the evidence and whistled. This isn't just a defense, Elena, he said. This is a total demolition. Are you ready? I nodded. I'm ready. It was the eve of Leo's 20th birthday. Julian had thrown a massive inheritance party at the mansion, even though the bank was days away from taking the building. He had invited everyone, hoping to use the news of Leo's trust to get more loans. I was at home, wearing an old, oversized sweater that hid my strength. Leo sent one final text, last chance to be a mother and sign the papers, or you're dead to me. Don't show up empty-handed. I felt a strange sense of calm. I looked at the bank books one last time. I'll be there, I typed back. I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve. I wasn't the floor mat anymore. I was the one who knew exactly where the dirt was hidden. The party was blindingly bright and expensive. Julian stood on the grand staircase, acting like a king, while Leo stood beside him, looking smug in a suit I had secretly paid for. Mr. Thorne walked in with me, carrying a thick leather file. The music stopped as the lawyer stepped forward. Per the late Mr. Sterling's instructions, we are here to discuss the trust, Thorne announced. Leo grinned at his friends. About time, he muttered. Thorne opened the file. The trust contains $2 million. However, the character clause requires a clean social record and a report on the heir's integrity. I stepped forward and tapped a button on my phone. The giant projector screen in the room flickered to life. It played the video of Leo mocking me at the bistro. The room went silent. The silence was deafening. The guests stared at the screen, then at Leo, then at me. The funds are frozen, Mr. Thorne said firmly. Based on the evidence of elder abuse and harassment, the character clause has been triggered. Julian's face turned a terrifying shade of purple. He didn't comfort Leo. He turned on him like a predator. You useless brat. Julian screamed, his voice echoing off the marble. I spent my last dime on this party to get that money. You couldn't even keep your mouth shut for a photo. Leo looked at his father, his eyes wide with shock. Dad, he whispered. Julian tried to strike Leo, his hand raised in a blind rage. I stepped between them, my eyes cold and steady. Don't you touch him, I said. Julian backed away, breathing hard, realizing his meal ticket was gone. The adrenaline that had kept me standing finally ran out. As Julian was being escorted out by his own security, the room began to spin. The years of double shifts, the night shift nursing, and the constant stress hit me all at once. I collapsed onto the cold floor. The last thing I saw was Leo standing there, frozen, as the paramedics arrived. I was rushed to the very hospital where I had worked for 15 years. When I woke up, I was in a ward I knew well. Leo was sitting in the corner of the room, looking small. He was staring at the wall of honor across from my bed. My picture was there, labeled Nurse of the Decade, for my work with underprivileged patients. He realized then that I wasn't a floor mat. I was a hero. For the next 2 days, I pretended to sleep whenever Leo was in the room. I watched him through narrowed eyes as he rummaged through my bag, looking for something. He finally pulled out a worn, blue notebook I called my future book. He sat on the floor and began to read. In those pages, I hadn't written about revenge. I had written about a dream. I had spent years scouting properties for a community clinic. I had drawn diagrams of how we would run it together, him as the business manager using his education, and me as the lead nurse. Every extra shift, every floor I scrubbed, was documented as a brick for his future. He began to sob, the quiet, shaking kind of grief that comes when you realize you've destroyed something beautiful. While I was recovering, Julian made one final, desperate move. He filed a false police report, claiming I had embezzled the trust money from his business years ago. He wanted to force a settlement. 2 officers showed up at my hospital room. Mrs. Elena, your ex-husband claims these funds were stolen, the officer said. They looked at Leo, who was standing by the window. We have a witness statement from Mr. Julian saying you were an accomplice to your mother's theft, Leo. Is that true? It was a crossroad. Leo could lie, save himself, and help Julian steal the trust, or he could tell the truth and face the consequences of his own past. He looked at me, his eyes red from crying. Then he looked at the police. My father is lying, he said clearly. Leo didn't just tell the police the truth, he went to the public. He took out his phone and started a live stream to his 50,000 followers. I need to tell you all something, he said, his voice trembling but getting stronger. He showed the original, floor mat, post. I was the person who posted this. I was the person who mocked my mother while she worked 2 jobs to save me. I am the trash in this story, not her. He then provided the digital evidence I had gathered, the recordings of Julian's fraud and the threats Julian had made. The video went more viral than the first one. By the time he finished, the police had already left to find Julian. Leo handed me my phone. I don't deserve the money, Mom. I know that now. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Julian. Based on the transcriptions I had provided to Mr. Thorne, and the new evidence from Leo, the IRS moved in. They performed a full audit on Julian's shell companies. Within a week, his assets were seized, and the mansion was padlocked. He was left with nothing but the suit he wore to the party. He called me from a prepaid phone, his voice shaking. Elena, please, he begged. I'm living in a motel. Just a small loan. For old time's sake. I remembered him calling me a substance abuser to the investors. I remembered him trying to hit our son. I'm sorry, Julian, I said calmly. I don't have a poverty mindset anymore. I only invest in things that have value. I hung up and blocked him. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, Leo followed me to the car. He expected to go back to our apartment to help me pack. When we arrived, he went to use his key, but it wouldn't turn. I had changed the locks while he was at the hospital. I handed him a small envelope. Inside was a note: "You told me you wanted a life without a poor mother holding you back. You said my mindset was contagious. Now you have the freedom you asked for." He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, please, I have nowhere to go." I didn't yell. I just looked at him with the same, steady hand I used in the ER. "You're an adult, Leo. It's time to see what a floor mat feels like." For the next few weeks, I watched from a distance. I found Leo outside the Silver Bistro, the same place where he had mocked me. He was talking to the manager, a woman I had known for years. She hired him, but not as a server or a host. She gave him a yellow vest and a scrub brush. He was the new dishwasher and floor cleaner. I sat in my car across the street, watching through the window. I saw him on his knees, scrubbing the same tiles I had cleaned. His friends walked by and laughed at him, taking photos just like he had done to me. He didn't snap back. He just kept scrubbing, his head down, finally learning the weight of $1 and the value of a person. 6 months passed. Leo worked every shift available. He lived in a tiny room and sent me a check every month, small amounts, $20 or $50, to pay back the loans he had taken from my heart. One morning, I called him. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street, I said. When he arrived, he looked different. He was thinner, but his eyes were clear and humble. I stood in front of a newly painted building. It was the clinic from my future book. I handed him a key. "This isn't a gift," I told him. "The trust has been released, but only to fund the charity wing. You will be the administrator, starting at the bottom wage. You will earn your place here." He hugged me, crying into my shoulder. The clinic opened a month later. We took a photo together in the lobby, standing in front of a plaque that honored my father. Leo posted the photo to his social media. The caption was a mirror of the one that had started this war. It read, "Imagine having this much ambition. My mother worked 2 jobs to build a world I wasn't man enough to see. Today, I am proud to follow in her footsteps." I looked at the camera and smiled. The character clause had been satisfied, but that didn't matter anymore. The money was just paper. My son was back, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to work 2 jobs to feel rich. I had saved his future, but more importantly, I had saved his soul.